Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the Identity Project. I was actually talking to a friend this past weekend, and it was my friend Jimmy, the one who does all of our video work for us, and he was telling me how he absolutely hates the intro for the podcast. And so as I was just doing that, I thought to myself, I'm like, this one's for you, Jimmy, okay? He said that he doesn't like my voice of like, of the and like talking like that. So anyways, long story short, without further ado, this man needs no intro. He's got the best beard in the whole entire world. I can see it. Y'all can see it if you're watching the via video. If not, you might just be listening. But no other than my friend Doc of the Wright Edge. What is going on, my man? How are you?
Good, Murphy. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm podcasting. One of my favorite things in the world these days. So, I'm happy. This is like my high, if you will.
Oh, dude, it's almost like therapy for an entrepreneur because you don't get to get this knowledge out sometimes, and it drives you nuts.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I honestly drive Alex crazy because we have our little baby Josiah here. He's 5 weeks old already, which is crazy. But every time I do a podcast, I'm like, hey, y'all have to be quiet, like, because I'm recording out of the house. So it's like she's downstairs watching TV. I'm like, turn the TV down, like, Josiah, don't cry,
Yeah.
But yeah, man, no, I really enjoy it. And I'm trying to get on like where I'm just doing like 1 or 2 a week schedule, but I've just been doing way more. Like I've been doing like probably 5 or 6 a week, which Alex is like 1 or 2 a week. I thought that was the agreement.
It's hard though, man. You look at guys like Joe Rogan that are popping out like 5 to 10 a week, and those are like 2 to 3 hours long.
Yeah, he's on a whole other level. He's definitely leading the pack of podcasters.
Yeah.
But dude, so obviously, the point of this podcast, it's the identity project. It's kind of going through, all these different identities throughout our life. And really what I like to do is, share stories that inspire. And, you're definitely an individual that I'd say your story is inspiring. And so I want to, before we dive into kind of like what you have going, for you now, I really want to kind of dive into, well, how did you actually get there? So dude, let's take it back. Where were you born? What year? Where were you? And then we'll kind of dive into your elementary school days.
I was born in Smithville, Texas, March 21st, 1984. And then I think shortly after that, we moved to Bastrop. And then we moved to Houston, where I went to kindergarten and first grade.
Very nice. And did you have this beard when you were in elementary school, or?
Dude, you're born with a beard like this. But do you remember how long it used to be?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's I know it's shorter now, but it's still, I mean, this is all I got. I can't grow a beard. My little brother, he's a freshman in college at Tech, actually. Shout out to Texas Tech basketball team.
Right, baby. Tonight's a big night.
Yeah. But anyways, he's 18, 19 years old. He has a better beard than I'll probably ever have. So I don't know where that came from, but anyways, so did you, like what were you like in elementary school? Did you play sports? Like, were you sitting here building stuff with wood? Like, what were you doing then?
Honestly, man, I only remember playing t-ball. And then my parents got divorced when I was 6. And so my half-sister and me had to move up with my grandparents in Maine. And then that was through 2nd grade. And then my mom ended up marrying my stepdad, and we moved to Canada for 3rd, 4th, and then half of 5th grade. So I played hockey for 1 or 2 years. I really don't remember, but yeah, man, I wasn't exposed to the level of sports that are around now, or just even like, New Brunswick, Canada, like play hockey. That's it. So
yeah. That's awesome, man. Though. I had a small little piece of hockey growing up. My next door neighbor actually played hockey, and so we would play like street hockey, like in his back, in his driveway. And I started playing goalie and like really enjoyed that because I played baseball my whole life and I played catcher at that time. So it was, pretty similar transition. But I remember one year, this is so crazy. We live in Texas, right? So it's like it snowed or we had this little ice storm or whatever. And we made these little blocks, right? And we had this thing where we were going to build an ice rink so we could actually play hockey. And so we made all these little blocks. We put it in his like freezer in his garage and like waited till the next year when it was actually like cold and like literally laid them all out. And obviously none of them connected or anything. Yeah. I had probably 1 or 2 years where I was pretty into hockey. So
no, it's a great sport, man. And believe it or not, Texas has actually become a hotbed for a lot of like junior level teams and stuff. Guy I used to work with, both of his sons were playing at like, I want to say it was like, I know it's like U18, but like they were on like the #1 like ranked team in Texas. I think they were like top 10 nationally the last 5 years. And it's all traveling kids. You have kids from Canada, Russia, all this other stuff coming down to just live with families in Texas, and they play for the Dallas Stars youth program. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew baseball and football and all that were really, and soccer. I mean, there's a lot of really, it's Texas, there's a lot of big sports out here, I guess. But yeah, I didn't know hockey was as big as it was.
It's getting there. It's getting there. And then, so after that, I left Canada to move in with my dad and my stepmom, and they were living just north of Boston. And then we stayed there for the rest of 5th grade, all of 6th grade, and then we moved down to Austin, and that's where my parents have been, and that's kind of where I grew up.
Very
so
nice.
Made it back to Texas.
So how did you, and I know this is probably a little bit more, personal subject, so if you don't mind going into it, but I know it's in terms of like identity shift and like going through these things in our life. I mean, how did that divorce affect you?
I was really young. I didn't quite understand. I know that, I got to stay with my dad for about 2 months while the courts were dealing with everything. And back around like 1990, 1991, it didn't matter how much of a fuck up mom was or dad was. Mom was going to get custody no matter what. And so I just remember staying with my dad, and I was like, why do I have to go? And then it didn't really, things didn't start hitting me until like right around 5th grade. And I really got tired of only seeing my dad like twice a year. And, my stepdad, I got lucky. He was a really good guy, but my mom is just a piece of work. In and out of detox, rehab, any kind of addiction you can think of, she had. And so around like beginning of 5th grade, I just realized this is not a good environment for me. Like, I'm going crazy. And started talking to my dad. I was like, hey, I want to move. Like, I want to move in with you and Shannon. He was like, talk to your mom. So I did. She said, no, courts say you have to live with us. And I was like, okay, well, then you have 2 choices. Either let me go live with dad, or I'm just going to start running away. And she thought I was bluffing, ran away that night, found me 2 days later, staying at a buddy's house. And she called my dad the next day, and he came and picked me up.
Wow. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, dude. I don't know, man. That has a lot of effect on me as a person now, and my tolerance with, like, kind of, what's the saying? Like, you make the bed you sleep in, and that whole saying that blood is thicker than water, I really have no weight in that. Because if you have a really shitty family member that's stealing from you and that's bringing in all these negative aspects of life, why are they in your life? Cut them out. All that's going to do is weigh you down and keep bringing you down. So you literally can, just point yourself in the right path and get through anything. And just, I understand, family and friends and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, your health and your life are the most important things.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting in those parallels of, I'm somebody that came from a family of addiction. It's something that, even me, myself, like it's been something that I have struggled with in my life. And I think there's a very interesting parallel between addiction and then like entrepreneurship, because in a sense, it's like, whatever, if there's ever been an addiction in your life up until this point, like now as being an entrepreneur and a business owner, I would argue you're addicted to that, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know, man. Like, you were a really good athlete. I know you played football, and you and I have actually even competed against each other on the CrossFit floor a few times. You have the same personality that I do. And even like Jake Thompson and I have talked about this. Every great athlete has to be extremely selfish with their time. And it's the same thing that can be said for entrepreneurs. And I think you're the same way as I am. Anything you put your mind to, it's 100% or nothing. And I don't know if the right word is addiction, obsession, two different words, but they can make the same meaning. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just that sink or swim feeling almost. How much do you want it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like, it's good to have that. It's good to have that motivation, right? If you want to go all in, as they say, like, that's essentially what you have to do. But then there's this whole other idea, this concept of like finding balance. And, I actually I had this representation that it was from Ben Bergeron actually, and I love it. So he basically breaks down like the five, like, pillars or like things that are most important to him in his life. There was like five things, right? And I don't remember exactly what they were, but he references them as basically balls. So there's five balls. Four of the balls are rubber. That could be like career, blah, 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 whatever, right? And then that last ball is glass, and that's family. And he talks about how life is this juggling act, and you're constantly juggling all five of those balls. And if you drop something like your career, then it bounces off the ground, right? And you can recover. But like with the family, if that drops on the ground and it's glass and it breaks, like that's the thing. So it was just I don't know, it just really made me kind of think about, my core values and my principles and really like, do I have these things set in place? What is most important to me? I don't know. It was just a very interesting concept that I hadn't heard before.
No, it's a great analogy. It's actually perfect in its simplicity. It's beautiful. I agree. Could not agree more.
I love it. I know I'm the king of going off on tangents. So,
oh, dude, that's what makes podcasts fun. Like you can have a narrative script, but once you start talking to somebody, like you and I have known each other for what, 4, 5, 6 years, and outside of just being guys, because we're guys, we don't talk about personal stuff. Because of this, we'll know each other on a whole new level, and that's cool to me. I like that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And what's interesting with us is that it's like, going back to the title of the podcast, it's like we knew each other in the identity of competing in CrossFit.
Yep.
And then now in this new identity of like entrepreneurs, business owners. But it's, you can pull like so many different, I guess, lessons and adversities from competing in sports to then competing in the game of life or the game of business, whatever you want to call it. So I love that, man. I love that. All right, let's get back to you. So you're growing up, at what point, because I know you were a big wrestler. So when did that start in high school then?
Yeah, I kind of heard a little bit about it in 8th grade, and then freshman year, I was playing football, baseball, and then I started wrestling. But, I played football in middle school, and then over the summertime, showed up to, summer practice for high school, and everybody grew 6 inches but me. So I was getting just knocked around. I was like, this ain't for me anymore, man. I'm too slow and too short. So just like you, I played catcher, played baseball, and then wrestling. I don't know, man. It was just one of those things. I just took to it like, water to a duck, and very quickly realized I just kind of had a knack for it. And so my parents were like, well, why don't we send you to some summer camps and, do all this? And I was like, okay. And then coming into my sophomore year is when things really started taking off. Like I started placing in national tournaments. Was doing summer wrestling, was on the national team for 3 years for Texas. And that's, dude, year round. That's all I did. Eat, sleep, and breathed it. So it was fun, man. I loved it. Nice.
And so coming from somebody that has gotten burnt out on multiple sports in my life now, did you ever have that with wrestling? Did you ever reach a point of burnout or
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I actually had a scholarship to wrestle at a D2 school in Minnesota, and making the transition from a high school athlete to a college athlete was a different ball game. Like, you're coming to be a senior, you're usually bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. And then now you're just a little fish in the pond again. And so we had a couple returning All-Americans that were around my weight, and I was just getting my ass kicked. But I still loved it until towards the end of the year. And this is where the NCAA thing was very interesting. So we had a 157-pounder, not going to mention his name, returning All-American, 2-time All-American, I think. and he was getting ready for nationals. And I was a redshirt. And so I was walking around probably around 150, 160. And this dude has kicked my ass all year. Like I haven't scored a point on him. And we're doing a full 7-minute match. And first period, I was stalling my ass off. I was just being purely defensive. Second period, he rides me. So, in college, if you ride somebody for more than a minute, you get a point. At the end of the match, if riding time is above a minute. And so third period, I'm like, we're going neutral. And he shot in kind of lazily, caught him with an over and under, and just straight up lat dropped him to his back and ended up holding him there for like the last 30 seconds. So I won the match, 5-1 or 5-0. And he gets up, straight up decks me in the face in front of like coaches and teammates, because we only had 2 guys qualify that year. So everybody's in there watching. And he straight up just decks me in the face. And I was like, what the fuck? And I looked at my coach. He storms out. And then assistant coach walks up to me and he goes, what do you think you're doing? I was like, what? He's like 3 or 4 days away from nationals and you're messing with his confidence. What are you doing? I was just like, okay. Maybe I didn't quite understand what I was here for, but after that, like I had a knee injury. I slightly tore my MCL, my LCL, and that kind of sidelined me for the rest of the school year. And towards the end of that, I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go home. I don't think this is for me anymore. Wanted to be a kid, and I didn't see myself staying there for all 4 years. So I was like, I'll just go be a regular kid. So that's when I transferred to Texas Tech.
Wow. That's crazy. That's an interesting transition. Mine was much different with my stint of college football that I played there for one semester. But wow, man, that's crazy. So, did you ever have another conversation with either one of those coaches, or you were just out that day and never came back?
No, I think everybody pretty much knew after that. Like I went to one more practice and then I just didn't show up for the rest of the practices. So I think everybody pretty much knew, and that was it. I have not spoken to anybody on that team, I think, since I left.
Wow.
But
hey, you go out with a bang.
well, it's interesting now because, back then YouTube wasn't around. Like, we don't have all these websites like Flow Sports, Flow Wrestling, Flow Grappling. So the amount of exposure you had to what the college game was nowhere existed. Like it did not exist. So my best friend here in Dallas, a guy named Brad, he actually wrestled at Iowa all 4 years. He's a Hawkeye, perennial powerhouse. And we've had that conversation. Like that's kind of what they bring in some of these, guys for, is you're literally just a training partner for the starters. Like he never started. He was behind back-to-back, 4 years, just studs, like national champs. And one is actually one of the assistant coaches at Iowa now, Ryan Morningstar. And he's like, yeah, that's just how it is and how it was. And I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. So I think if I would have known that walking into it, it might have been a different environment and a different mentality. Because I was just like, hey, I'm just getting better, going to wrestle this guy all out and see what happens. But I don't know. It was just very interesting. And I wish I would have known then what I know now. But who doesn't?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the perfect statement right there, right? Like, I wish I would have known, right? How many times have we said that? But yeah, dude, it's the same thing with football. It's like coming from Texas football, going up to this small school in Kansas. I got up there. Really, I just wanted to say I played college football. That's really what it was. I realized, later on, but that's really what it was. And I went up there and it was like my high school football field, my weight room, our uniforms, like everything about Texas high school football was better than college in Kansas, right? Like,
oh God, yeah. Our high school stadiums beat most D2 and D3 school stadiums. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, and the worst part is I went out there once. I went out there one time to visit, and I still went. And it was literally because I wanted to say that I played college football. That's it.
Yeah, dude.
I wish I would have like just been like, you know what? Like I think my advice honestly to my kid or kids these days would probably be, unless you are just in love with the sport and that's like you're dead set and that's what you want to do. Like if you don't get a scholarship to go play D1, I would start focusing on your future going forward and not, because it's a full-time job, whether you're a D1 athlete or even NAI or D3, like it's a lot.
Oh, yeah. So it's a ton. It's unreal. Like I can like I had a when I went to tech, I was taking organic chemistry, and there was a girl that sat next to me when she was in town. She was on the golf team, and I can honestly tell you, I think she was only in class maybe 20 to 25% of the time. Like their schedule is just insane. Being a student athlete, it really is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, even like I said, even at the NAI school I was at, I mean, we would have like morning workouts at 6 a.m. Then we would have like class, and then we would have practice, and then we would like have, dinner, and then we'd have study hall that night. And so it was like, you're talking like basically 6 to 8 hours a day or so, like you're with like the team. So it's a lot for sure.
Oh, it's a ton. It's a ton. And I still, I'll go ahead and say it. I think, I understand college athletes get, their school paid for the most part. But you look at a sport like wrestling in a full D1 program, even Penn State, who just won their 8th national championship out of the last 9 years, 10 scholarships. That's it. So either start paying those kids a little bit of money for that time or open the scholarship range. Do something, because especially football's crazy, wrestling's crazy, basketball's crazy. Do something to help those kids, because that is a rough life.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a tangent that could go off for days of the whole NCAA.
Yeah, let's get away from that, because I'm the same way as you, man. I could talk about it for days.
Yeah, yeah. So when you came to, well, first off, how did you know that you wanted to go to tech? I mean, what kind of, like, did you know what you wanted to get into, what you wanted to study, or you were just like, hey, tech looks cool, I'm going there?
Being from Austin, I'm very familiar with UT, and I'm not a huge fan of the city. Hill country is gorgeous, but UT itself, I just really wasn't a fan of. And my stepmom's an Aggie, so they're bananas. And so tech was the only other choice. I was like, yeah, I'll go. I never visited, nothing. I had a really good high school friend of mine who also was transferring from UTSA. He played basketball there. And he was like, let's go to tech. I was like, all right, let's go to tech. And that's what we did. And no, man, if you could write a literal definition of what a jock was in high school, that was me. Didn't really care about school. As long as I could pass, I could play. Kind of took the SATs jokingly. So when I got to tech, I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what I liked to do. Had no real direction. So my stepmom was like, well, why don't you just take a bunch of different classes your first year and kind of see what you like? So I did. I took, some business classes. I took like one teaching class. I took math class, science class, it's kind of the full spectrum. And I quickly realized I did not like subjects to where you and me could have varying opinions on something and nobody was right. So I just kind of naturally started gravitating towards the sciences, which is not opinion-based. Everything's data-driven. So it's not my opinion. This is what the data shows. So I just went full bore into the science realm.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was very, very, very similar going into school. Yeah, honestly, the story that you just told was pretty much very similar to what it was. But yeah, I mean, I think that, just thinking back on it now, I think that period of transitioning from high school to college is a period that I really, really wish I just would have had more influence and more, resources, and just like, I mean, I see what I did for like my brother and sister going into college this last year. And yeah. I'm like, man, I wish I had that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because unfortunately, high school doesn't actually prepare you for college. Because the day you leave high school, everybody's holding your hand, making sure you got across that stage. You go to college, all of a sudden you show up, nobody gives a shit. And then they're like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Let's talk about that right now. And you have no idea. You're just a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, dude, I was literally you. I was the kid that religiously worked out at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. Like got it. Like we had powerlifting at my school. So I was really big into all that. But I would literally get done with my workout from 6 to 8 or whatever. And then I would be the kid that slept. Like I would literally walk into class with my head on the desk and sleep. But when I got into college, like it was the same thing. It was like, oh shit, like I really have to like actually study. So I had to learn how to study. which that was hard. I mean, luckily Alex was really good at all that. And so she really helped me with a lot of it.
That was probably one of the hardest things, was learning how to study.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Well, and especially I would argue when your brain doesn't necessarily think that way, or like it doesn't necessarily learn in that traditional sense. Because I didn't find this out until I was about halfway through school, that if I took notes during class, like most people did, and read the textbooks and all that, like I sucked shit at school. But when I started reading, when I started listening to the lectures and watching, like recording the class and like just watching the video, like it was a game changer. And I mean, that translates into what I do now. I mean, I study and read more now than I ever have in my whole entire life, but everything is through videos and podcasts and audiobook. Like, so.
And I also think it's easier for, what you're doing. And I'm sure you're the same way in school. Like, I struggled really hard with classes that I didn't think mattered to, what I wanted to do. So that was really tough. But then once you were in the classes that you really, really enjoyed, it was easy. You actually cared. So now that you found your calling and you care, you have no problem reading and listening and doing all that stuff daily. It's fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, literally, like I stood up in my speech class in college and failed the final exam because I had a note card. I was doing a presentation on something I had no idea about. I could care less about, but I had to do it on that topic. Right. And I'm like, I literally read my note card. I didn't look up at the class one single time. And I was sweating and I was like shaking, and like public speaking was like my biggest fear in my whole entire life. And then fast forward to, being done with college, and like I actually posted this on my Instagram story today, like as a flashback or whatever, the biggest stage I ever did, like I've spoken in front of 350 people before. And I was nervous for sure, but like, it was just, the execution was way different because again, the information, like I've been doing this forever. Like this is my thing versus, oh, I have to study this, look it up, try to learn about it, and then present about it and like not be passionate about it,
Oh yeah.
So, well, dude, so when you, as you're kind of finishing up, well, I guess as you're transitioning, going through school, like what did you finally end up like figuring out what you wanted to do? And then what did kind of that first job look like for you there out of college?
I really took to geology and chemistry. So I was kind of battling back and forth on which to major in. And then I just decided to end up going with geology, and graduated in 2008 during the massive, financial decline and all that stuff. So there was nothing in oil and gas out there. So my first job was down in Austin working for a water resource company. So we were drilling like industrial water wells and stuff like that. And I did that for like 9 months. It was a really small company, and yeah, that wasn't the job for me. So I ended up taking a job up in Dallas working for a national environmental firm. And then, what was that? 6 months into that, it got announced that they're going to shut down the Dallas office. So they were like, well, hey, there's 2 other job openings that we think you'd be a good fit for: Long Beach, California, or Seattle, Washington. I was like, well, California has state tax. Do I get a raise? They're like, no. It's like, all right, I guess I'll go to Seattle. So moved up to Seattle, I think in 2010, and was there for 14 months, traveled all over Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington working. And then an engineering firm up in Frisco actually found me somehow, and they offered me a pretty sweet job to move back to Texas. So I was like, hell yeah, let's go. So moved back down, and then was there for 2 years. They ended up getting bought out by a global company called Apex. And I just happened to be online one day on LinkedIn, and oil company that I ended up spending 4 years with found me, and I was there until I started this business.
Wow. That's awesome, man. So what did you, before we dive into what you do now, what were your like biggest lessons that you learned through kind of that early career, and really, probably some of those lessons that shaped you into who you are now? I guess the better question would be, what did you learn about yourself through that time? Because I know you struggled with a lot of the jobs, the positions, the people over you, all of that. But like, I guess, what did you learn about yourself through that process?
Well, I learned that the corporate world was very different than what I perceived it to be, because our parents grew up in a generation to where, you know, you go to college, you get the degree, you get the job, you get the retirement, that's it. You know, you stay in that same spot. But now we live in a world to where if you want to make those bigger financial jumps, you have to, you know, pop around at a few different companies every, you know, 3 to 4 years. Otherwise, you're just, you know, going to be in the same spot. And that kind of just took me by surprise that, you know, payment structures and grade structures, none of it made sense. And then the biggest thing was corporate politics. Just that drove me bananas. I hated that. So the last like 2 years of my last job, I just realized this was not the world for me, or at least at the time, it wasn't the place for me. Because I'm a scientist. Everything to me is ones and zeros. I never thought on earth I'd own my own business, let alone doing woodworking. That was not even on the radar. So I didn't know what it was going to be, but I just knew I wasn't going to be there.
Yeah. So, you know, let's dig into it because this is the part that's like crazy to me. So how, like, I mean, look, I've seen some, I mean, I came up and visited, I'm blanking on the name, what hotel that was. Remind me.
The Delta by Marriott.
Right. So, and I saw all of your pieces there, and I mean, it's mind blowing. Like, I mean, I brought my grandpa and my dad with me. Like, I'm not necessarily the person that's super into this, but I know how like super into it they are, and just to see the smiles on their faces when they're walking around was like priceless. Did you grow up? Did you grow up doing that? Like learning that craft or like woodworking, or like how did that all happen? Like,
no, man, I grew up. My dad was a plumber, so you know I grew up plumbing. And then every summer he was, you know, if I wasn't wrestling, he was like, all right, well, you're going to do concrete this summer. And then the summer after I graduated high school, you know, I did framing all summer. So not woodworking at all, just general knowledge of tools and, you know, working. And so I was looking for a stress relief because I ended up fracturing my left hand power cleaning one day. Just elbow caught my knee and fractured 2 metacarpals. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm not really enjoying CrossFit anymore. So what could I do? And so neighbor that lives a few blocks behind me, she was redoing her front patio. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Should only take me like 2 or 3 days. So I knocked it out, looked great. And then a friend of mine, you know, Nate 40.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he hit me up and he was like, hey man, I just bought this really cool table from Crate and Barrel. You know, I want a live edge bench. You think you can make one? I was like, yeah, why not? So I looked online and there's only really 3 places in all of DFW to buy live edge wood, and they were all ungodly expensive. So I went on Craigslist and found now, you know, the guy who I work with almost every day. Found him on Craigslist, went down there, met him, bought 3 pieces of wood for $300, you know, did some Google research and some YouTube research. I was like, okay, now I have a list of tools I need to go buy. And that's kind of how it started.
That's so crazy to me. It's like
farting around in the garage.
It's literally the emoji, the mind blown emoji. That's what's happening right now. I'm gonna have to go back and edit this and have the mind blown emoji popping up by your head. Dude, that's so crazy, man. So you quit your big corporate job. Like talk about that transition process though. Like, I mean, talk about the thoughts going through your head, talk about the stress, talk about the fear, like talk about all that transitional period.
I feel like this is the part of the story that is the rarity of talking to other entrepreneurs, because I didn't have that kind of like, you know, do I go now? Do I wait? So I picked up those first pieces of wood on December 7th of 2016. And from December 7th through, I want to say it was like end of January, beginning of February, a custom home builder in Lubbock reached out to me, and I didn't have a business name. I didn't have a logo. I didn't have anything. Like, you know, Dean Zoo was starting to work on that, but, you know, I wasn't going to buy an LLC. I just, you know, saw other woodworkers online had a little logo and a name. So I was like, oh, I want that too. But they reached out to me and they wanted me to bid on a 14 by 5 foot walnut conference room table. So I did. And then a couple days later, they reached back out to me and they're like, well, hey, we want 5 different tables, all different sizes. Can you do it in all like different species? So I called up, Andy Hood, who's, my business partner. That's not my business partner. We're just as thick as thieves. I was like, you think we can do that? And he was like, yeah, we can figure it out. Okay. So submitted the bid. Week later, they were like, okay, where do we send the check to for the 50% deposit? I was like, just go ahead and send it to my house. I got to buy the LLC and do all this stuff. And that's what I opened up the business account with. So right out of the gate, it was a 6-figure job. And so the second I got that deposit, I was looking at it and I was like, well, not married. I don't have kids. I hate my job. Fuck it. Let's go. Let's give it a run. So
I fucking love, like, I have like blood like flowing through my veins. I love it. Like, that's so awesome, man. So how like they saw, how did they contact you? Like, it was Instagram, they saw your stuff on Instagram. Like, what was it?
Yeah, Instagram. The interior designer that was overseeing the job somehow found me. And at the time, I had just installed my first and only dining room table at that point. So they only got to see one table before they were just like, yeah, we'll go with you. It's like, wow. Okay.
Did you like significantly underbid in comparison to the other people, or were you, no, just, that's crazy. That's so crazy. Because you would think, right, like if they only saw that one piece and then you like significantly underbid and they're, oh, I'm gonna take advantage of that, but that wasn't the case.
No, because I don't know, it was common sense to me because the dining room table I'd done before, they had bought the base for the table at a store by North Park Mall called Airhaus, and they sell custom live edge tables that are made by Amish up in, Pennsylvania, I think it is. And, a 8-foot table, 4 feet wide, they were selling for $16,000. And so you apply that same logic, like, okay, that's retail. So they're probably getting, 10 to 20% of the overall cut. And then the rest goes to the maker. But they wanted like 5 different trees custom harvested just for this job. Like, they wanted it from start to finish, 100% custom. So it was just kind of common sense on how I came up with that bid. And when they said yes, I was like, oh, Jesus, this is real.
Dang.
Now I had to put up or shut up. And yeah, let's just say we learned a lot on that job.
Yeah, no, that's crazy, man. That's so crazy. So when you, I can only imagine, you receiving a check, I would guess the biggest check you've ever received in your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, dude. So was there a moment of like, was it just all excitement at that time, or was there fear?
There was fear, but it was a different kind of fear. Mostly just, it was a lot of excitement, but it was also a time of just figuring a lot of things out. Like, securing the LLC, getting the logo work done, getting the initial website done, getting set up with my accountant, just the initial building blocks of it. And so luckily I had time because, we went out and immediately started harvesting some trees, and then we had to get them milled, and then we got them in a kiln, and they were going to sit there for, 4 to 6 months. So we had a little bit of time to kind of start figuring some things out. And so when they did come out of the kiln, we just hit the ground running. We already had a game plan down, how we were going to do it. Of course, there was curveballs. Like, one of the species that we were going to use, beautiful, beautiful wood, but it was so soft, like your sander, your rotary sander would burn it. It was just a really soft wood. So we called the client. We're like, hey, we don't think this is going to work. It's too soft, it's too much of a risk. And they're like, okay, well, what are other options? Well, luckily, Andy had some, live oak slabs that, he had been sitting on for a few years, just sitting out. So sprayed some water on them, sent them to the client. They liked them. We went with it. There was a lot of curveballs and a lot of things that we just didn't know at the time, because you don't know what you don't know. And there's no harm in that. But it wasn't cockiness and it wasn't arrogance. We just firmly believed that we could figure this out. Two smart guys have been working with their hands their entire lives. We can almost figure anything out. So we just had that confidence just to, yeah, man, we'll just figure it out.
Wow. I love that, man. I mean, it's just a definition of like at some point you got to just jump. Like, I mean, you can sit here and debate, you can plan, you can create the ultimate business plan, you can do that. I mean, and not to say that, there isn't like strategy and all of it that needs to be considered, but it's just like, I mean, I think back to me starting this business, it's the same thing. Actually at one point we did an Instagram live together when I hadn't started the business yet and you had just started yours. And
yeah,
so
I think you're exactly a year behind me.
yeah, well, and I had influences in my life that helped in terms of environment, because I think when you surround yourself around people that, me and you do completely different stuff, but like we can relate in, what was CrossFit. Now we can relate in what is, being a business owner, an entrepreneur. And
100%.
I think that's cool.
100%. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And, I don't really read a lot of like entrepreneurial business books. I think there's just a little bit too much fluff in there. And I just don't find it that interesting. But I tell everybody this, and I think I told you this, no matter how much you plan for it, you're never going to be ready for the onslaught of shit that's about to come your way, because you have no idea. And you can talk to business planners, come up with a great business plan. As soon as you jump, half of that automatically goes out the window, because you just don't know what your business is going to evolve. And in the first year, it's going to evolve very fast, just like yours. You're up to what, 3-4 employees now in the first year? Did you plan for that? Was that in your business plan?
No, luckily I, again, had a good environment and started my business under the mentorship of a business coach from the inception, which most people, that's not the case. So I learned a lot in my first year and super thankful for it. And I'm really excited going into the second year of being able to take a lot of the lessons that I learned from, that first mentor, because I'm no longer working with him. And really for the first time in my life, like it's just me with the business now, because before it was like, I kind of felt like, he was on my team a little bit there. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, man. But let's fast forward a little bit. So what happened to you on a whim has now turned into, you literally like living out what looks like a lifelong passion. I mean, maybe you hadn't been doing it before, but now, I mean, I would have thought you were doing it your whole life. Dude, what is like, I mean, where are you at right now? Where's your whole headspace? Like, are you just, I mean, maybe give people some context around like what this has evolved into, and then give them some context into just how your mindset has evolved over the last couple of years here.
So, it all started in my, garage that I think was probably built in the 40s. It all started out of there. And then, last summer summer before that. So about 6 to 8 months into the business, was looking at renting retail space or, shop space. Couldn't really find anything. And so talking to Andy, he's out on 8 acres in Red Oak. We were looking at the finances, and we just, we don't have any business loans. We don't have any investors, no business line of credit. It's all been cash flush, and that's how we want to keep it for as long as we can. So we decided to build a 30 by 60 shop, on his property. And we've been in there for, just coming up on a year. We're about to double the size of it. So from where it started, we did have some good foresight, but I mean, that was scary as hell, dropping, over 30 grand for the shop, 20,000 for a single piece of equipment, another 8 grand for, a brand new website done by Tori at Hooked on Code. Like, all these stuff just hit within like 3 months. And that was scary as hell, because that sucked up every profit that we had. But I quickly figured out the magic formula on how to get into, Ritz-Carlton, Omni, Marriott's, Sheraton Hotel. I just kind of figured out that magic formula. And that's kind of what I focused on for the first year and a half. That's been great. And then lately, I've really been trying to focus on getting into the larger corporate jobs. Like we just did our first, or it was our largest single job to date for the Choctaw Nation up in Durant, Oklahoma. We outfitted their courthouse with 13 pieces, and they're all big. And then, did a 18-foot table for Mizzen and Maine. Of course, I got some private clients on the side, but with my head where it's at now, like we started off making, tables. That was our go-to. And then we started getting asked to make, more artistic pieces, like fully chainsaw carving, a 13-foot tree and do a bench that still weighs like 2,000 pounds. And come to find out, they had already contacted like 9 other makers and nobody would touch the job. So then we started getting this reputation of being able to make what nobody else would make. It was too scary. And the biggest prime example that you've personally seen are the walls that we did. Like just shy of 1,300 square feet of walls made out of, Perota 4x4s and 3-inch flat stock steel. Like nobody helped us with that. There was no YouTube video or guidebook, or nobody knew. Literally nobody knew. So we just kind of took the same mentality. It's like, well, we'll just figure it out like we always do. And so that's kind of where we've really done a good job of separating ourselves from most everybody else, is we just don't do the basic stuff. We still can, but now we're importing all of our wood from Costa Rica, and we get the biggest stuff in the country, 26-foot slabs, cross cuts that are bigger than you and me. And then these giant root balls that are, 1,700 pounds that, you really don't see in the country. So we're just progressively going towards the more decorative, artistic, but bigger stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I mean, for those of you that obviously we'll share your Instagram and website and all that here at the end, but I got to witness it like in person and shared a few pictures on my story if any of y'all follow me on Instagram here. But like I said, my grandpa was an architect. My dad has been a plumber. Now he like builds houses and does remodeling and all this stuff. And, like their appreciation for it and just like seeing the look on their face. I mean, to me, it was cool, but I was just, I can't appreciate all the hard work that goes into that and like the creation and like everything that it took to do it, just because it's just not my, like, I guess, headspace. But with them, like, it was just so cool to see. And dude, it's just, your work is just fucking awesome. Like that's basically
Dude, thanks, man. And that's what I like, is when people can actually come see it. Because it's one thing to see pictures of it and you're like, oh man, that looks cool. And then when you see the scope of the size in person, you're like, how in God's name did you do that?
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, I just remember all the stuff my dad would make me do growing up. And I think to myself, like, even with all that experience, like there is no way in hell, even with all the Google searches and YouTube videos in the world, that I'd be able to figure that out.
Yeah, man. And that's been the cool part about this. And I'll kind of retract a little bit. So when I started the business, I honestly thought like Instagram was going to be the big key on how to, get into the community and get exposure. But it didn't take me very long to realize, well, 95% of everybody that I was following on Instagram and like really trying to talk to, it's not their job. They're DIY makers, and they sell on Etsy and Craigslist and whatnot. They'll have 70,000 followers, but this is not their main source of income. So I really didn't have a resource in the woodworking world at the time who actually was running a business that I could talk to and, kind of exchange ideas. And so I tried going to, a few other avenues like Kevin Lavelle and Jake Thompson, which they're brilliant men in their own way. And I kind of like how you and I talk. There are some parallels that you can take, but outside of that, there's really nothing there for me. It's like, what do I want to do? So we just, I kind of started figuring some things out, and I'm still figuring things out. I don't have this figured out, dude. I'm just a retard playing with wood. But after that, now that, after 2 years now, it's very interesting because I found one guy in the country who's doing the same size of stuff that I'm doing and really kind of like the more artistic stuff. And I started following him on Instagram. He started following me. We started chit-chatting back and forth. Well, during the showcase, during the Delta last month, he just happened to be in Dallas for an install. He was installing a table at a restaurant, and him and his employee actually came up, and we had a couple drinks. And, man, it was just so cool talking to somebody that's at his level. And he was like, no, man, it's just you and me. You're the only ones that are doing what we're doing. And, man, where you're at 2 years is awesome. And I was like, damn, dude, I appreciate you saying that. He's like, you know what, man, there's not a lot of people doing what we're doing in this aspect, or at least within, we're both not mass producing. So we don't have a fleet of people. Our level of customization is borderline at a different level compared to some. And, we're just doing it a little bit differently. And so he's like, no, man, at the end of the day, dude, real recognizes real, man. You make cool shit, and I like that. I was like, that's awesome, man. If you ever need anything, call me. And he was like, same to you, man. So we've kept in contact since then. And it's awesome. Finally, him and another guy out of Ohio, it's cool finally meeting some of these guys that are like-minded in the same industry, because I never had that before. So it's been so relieving finally talking to some of these guys.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I haven't heard of many woodworking masterminds.
Nah, dude, they're few and far between, honestly.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. And I mean, like I said, I mean, I think me getting into a mentorship and into a mastermind from the inception of the business and being able to network and create, I mean, I have a group of, 25 people or so that were like an awesome, and still are an awesome like support group to be able to talk to that are kind of living exactly what I'm doing. So, I mean, to not have that, and to really, really just feel like it's just you. I mean, I think that just goes to show, the mental fortitude that you had and the vision and the dream that you had, for y'all's mission of what y'all want to accomplish, because it's easy to like hop on a bandwagon. Like it's easy to become an online nutrition coach. Like everybody and their freaking mother's doing it these days. But I think to set out on your own path and really kind of pave the way is something that, those are the people we read about. So it's awesome, man. It's inspiring. If I have a question for you. So I come to you and I'm like, money is literally nothing. It's no obstacle whatsoever. And I say, Doc, I want you to build me the best piece of art that you've ever done for my 10,000 square foot house. What would you design? What would you make?
That's a good question, man. Dude, now you're hurting my head, man. There's so many different avenues I could take that. I would honestly say probably a mix between 4 different realms. And I'm doing 2 of them right now with one client's table. So we have this giant root ball that we chainsaw carved up, and, been doing some artistic carvings in it. And we got 2 pieces together, and that's going to be a dining room table base. And then they're going to have a wood top in their dining room on top of it. I would do something like that, but a lot bigger. And then also either incorporate tempered glass or like some really cool glass design, either metal design or even stone, and not inlay it with the table, but infuse it with the top. So it's not just a straight top. You could do it, glass, stone, that kind of thing, and just go to town making something epic. That's what I'd like to do. I think it'd be cool.
I love it. I don't even understand anything you just said. You just blew my mind, and all I want to do is write you a check. How much do I owe you?
No, dude, like that's what I love about this. Like as soon as we get off here, I actually have to drive to go meet a firm that is speccing me for a job in Florida. And the design they have is cool, but it's already been done by 100 other people. It's easy. So I'm driving up there and I'm going to be like, guys, we can do so much better. We can go next level. So I'll see what they say, man, because nobody knows how far we can take this unless you kind of show it to them. Like anytime people come down to the shop and look at the inventory that you saw at the showcase, you don't know it's even possible until you see what I have. So just wait until you see what I have, and then we can start discussing what we can do with it, because sky's the limit. So it's fun, man.
I love that, man. And that's got to be so fun for the buyer, right? Because it's just, I mean, from a creative perspective, I mean, of course people love customized work, but I feel like this is actually like another level of customization, because especially if they go to the shop, they pick out whatever slab they want and make, I mean, I think that just whole kind of process is really cool. Maybe you'll be like flying in customers, and they like, you'll have at some point you'll have this just like huge shop, and like people like fly in, they pick something and they just go through this whole like process. That'd be cool.
It's going to happen in the very near future, man. If the trend keeps continuing the way that I've seen the growth of the business from 18 already to the first quarter of 19, that's definitely on the horizon. But, what I tell all my clients, like when they're, in the initial stages of even just the bidding process, is like, look, you can go buy a custom piece that you want, but it's not custom made for you. You didn't design the base. You didn't design the color. You didn't get to pick out your slab. You didn't, decide if you wanted inlays, bow ties, epoxy work, glass work. What kind of finish do you want on it? All these different variables that we just get to that next level. And then at the end of the whole build, I offer this as an option, and most people take it, is I'll give you a thumb drive of every video and picture that I took during your build process. That way you can actually see it documented all the way through. And they're like, that's cool as hell. I'm like, there you go.
Dude, that is so badass. I love that. Like storytelling the process. It's almost like the companies that like I don't even know any names of them, but it'll be like you buy a bag and it says like who made the bag and from what country or whatever. Like, that's cool. That's really cool. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about like going through like a slideshow and seeing how like my baby was made, essentially, right?
That's pretty much exactly what it is. And that's where I, kind of remove myself from Instagram. Like, it's rare to see like a very personal post on my business page on Instagram, because the only reason I have Instagram is to document builds for my clients. Because, if I added all that to my website, it's information overload. It's too much. There's too much to scroll through and look at. So on the main page of the website, there's a link to my Instagram page that's pretty big. And that way, if clients go on the website, they can literally see where their build is during that process. And that's the only reason I use Instagram. It's good for that.
Yeah, it's your virtual photo album. I mean,
That's right.
The old days, they would just like flip through it, and now they can just scroll through it. So
yeah, man.
Well, dude, I could probably sit here and ask you questions and chat all day, but I do have one more that I want to ask you. This one's for I would say young entrepreneurs, but I don't even have to put that title on it. Let's just say entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs out there. And this was a question I probably had from you or for you probably a year ago or so. But dude, somebody that comes to you, it does not matter the industry whatsoever, but they're unhappy with where they are at this moment in their life. And they've been thinking about pursuing something in kind of this entrepreneurial realm, making the jump, if you will. What's just maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice for them, that are going through a transition, and it's not as black and white maybe as it was, for you or other people. They're really, really struggling with what that decision looks like.
I'm going to go away from advising what I would say most normal people would advise, make sure you have a business plan and, all that crap. I think the first thing would be, if you're really serious about it, and let's break it down. So are you going to be offering a service like you, or are you going to be offering a product? Now, based on that, if you're going to be offering a service, okay, great. Go do research on what everybody else that's doing what you're doing is doing, and figure out how you can be different. What is going to separate yourself from the pack? Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, nobody's really going to give a shit. If you're offering, a product, okay, now you really need to start thinking about logistics, sourcing materials, where you're going to buy it, where your funds are going to come from to buy it. Like, those are probably the 2 biggest things. And then I would add on to that and say, try not to take on an investor, because once you do, they're never going away. And you don't know what that business relationship is going to be like. And the business relationship could go to shit, but you're still financially tied to that person. So before you do that, if you really need money that bad, try to find another avenue for that. if you don't have to take out a bank loan, don't do it. Just because if you get that money back, well, now you have to pay the loan back and you never really had the money in the first place. And the other thing I think that you and I discussed earlier is, man, just have the balls to do it. Jump. You will never work harder at this if you only have a foot in the water until, you're drowning, spitting up water, you're treading and you're barely holding it up. You will never work harder in that moment than if you're just kind of like, oh, this is, my thing. Just, it's trial by fire, man. You got to go in.
Yeah, dude, I 100% agree. I think that it's never going to be the right time, and that's life. That's every aspect of life.
Yeah.
So when they make this jump, man, and this is something that, I get asked a lot about, and it's something that never goes away. It's something I think everybody struggles with forever. So it's just more about, dealing with it and managing it and addressing it. But what happens when that negative voice creeps inside your head and tells you that you're going to fail? And, that demon, if you will, on that one shoulder, because I'm sure that voice probably creeps its little head, onto your shoulder sometimes. Do you struggle with that? And if you do, what do you tell yourself?
I can honestly tell you, I've had really stressful moments, to where business literally didn't have any money. I had to cash out my 401k last year. We had 3 jobs that were due in June and they got pushed back to October. So I had to personally float the business until that delays, but that has taught me to rewrite, my invoices differently. And, that was a big lesson learned, to make sure that we get that money when they originally said we were going to get that money. Learning lesson, like small things like that, to the point where now, again, I don't know what I don't know yet. So I'm sure there's going to be stuff coming up in the future, but based on some of the jobs that we've done in terms of our capabilities, there's really nothing that scares us because we're just really good at figuring it out. But the only self-doubt that probably comes up is just, how to continue to grow the business, how to do it right. And I guess that would be it, man. I don't know. It's the stress and the doubt is different for me because when I went personally, like financially personally into it, there's no going back. Failure is literally not an option at this point unless it just goes under. So I don't have that luxury of having that doubt come in.
You just don't give it thought. You just don't give it any thought.
I can't, because that kind of thinking is so infectious. Once that thought gets in, and this comes back to who you surround yourself with. Joe Rogan even talks about it, like those I can't catch a break guys, get them the fuck away from me. Everybody's failed at something. It's how you take that failure and apply it to the future. That's all that matters, man. So I hate to say it, but I've had to really restructure my thought process on who I allow into my life, because that thought literally can't happen in my head. That is not an option.
And that's exactly what I was hitting at. You hit it right on the head. It's energy, right? Like there's positive energy, there's negative energy. The saying of, you're the product or you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Like it's true.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly true. So dude, I love what you're doing, my man. You're an inspiration, man. And, I think it's so cool, Jake and other people around in this Dallas area that are, kind of taking this entrepreneurial leap, if you will. Like, it's just cool. I mean, it's cool to have people in the area to talk to. It's cool to, bounce ideas off of, help people through, that when they are having those negative times. And I don't know, just kind of give each other kind of some reassurance, and I don't know, feel like we're on a team, and we're on a mission to really help people and make this world a better place. So dude, I love what you're doing, my man. Where can everybody find you at? Where's your website, Instagram, all the things?
You can find my website at www.thewrightedge.com, and that's right with the W. Instagram's the same thing, The Wright Edge. Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. Please take a look. We make some pretty cool stuff, I think. And if you get a chance, if you live in the DFW area, hit me up and I'll tell you where you can go see some of my stuff in person because it's pretty wicked.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
No, Murphy, it's a pleasure, man. And like I've always told you, man, anytime you need me, anything, anywhere, let me know.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man.